I said a couple weeks ago, and I'll say it again, it's always interesting that at times churches choose to pay attention to what's happening in the rest of the world, and at times we try to ignore what's happening in the rest of the world. But if we believe what the Gospels say is true, what Jesus teaches us about faith is true, we can't help but talk about how our faith is lived out in the context of all these things that are happening. And so all the things that are happening in our lives become holy. It becomes holy as we celebrate birthdays with our family members because we think life is important and the people we love are important. Faith becomes part of our lives as we celebrate things like Mother's Day and Father's Day because we think parental love, maternal love is important and reflects God's love. And yes, even as we talk about things like the 4th of July and Independence Day, we find in that ideas like equality and freedom and liberty, which we think are good and holy things. The fact is, there are many Independence Days, right? Like, what's the statistic? The number one holiday celebrated around the world is independence from Great Britain. It's Canada Day on July 1st, and Bastille Day on July 14th, and Colombian Independence Day on July 20th, and U.S. Independence Day on the 4th of July. There's something about that celebration of freedom, of holidays that are rooted in equality and justice and rights that are important. Jesus himself talks about the value of freedom, as does Paul. And yet, you know, Megan and I watch a lot of TV, maybe more than we ought to. But, you know, one of the things, if you watch a lot of TV, you discover that the number one thing advertised are those pharmaceutical ads, right? Where they say that this will make your life better. This will make everything better. Tell your doctor to get you this medicine because then it'll fix everything. By the way, you're going to lose your pinky toe and all your teeth are going to fall out, right? Like there's that voice at the end that gives all the little warnings really fast so that you don't hear them and pay attention to them. There's a disclaimer on talking about independence and freedom in the church. There's a prescription warning, a user warning that goes with it. And that's that while there are good things in celebrating our freedom and independence, what we hear in Scripture is that good things can become idols when we place them out of order. Good things can become idols when they are viewed with the wrong priorities. And so we talk a little bit this morning, and I think that we have to, about the dangers inherent with celebrating any of these national holidays, whether you're talking U.S. Independence Day or, yes, even Canada Day or any other national holiday. You see, I think in 2022, that doesn't sound right. In 2022, in this country in particular, there are too many of us who are Americans who happen to be Christian rather than Christians who happen to live in America. That is, when we think about what our identity is, we've gotten things out of order. That I'm an American first, and I happen to go to Spirit of Joy Lutheran Church. And I view my faith through that lens of what it means to be an American. Or I'm a Democrat first, or a Republican first, or take your pick of identities. The gospel tells us that whenever we put another identity ahead of our identity of children of God in Jesus Christ, we are worshiping an idol. And worshiping idols tears down the gospel, tears down our hearts, and tears down the community of the gospel that we call church. We often call it nationalism in particular when it comes to this one. And so we have to be clear as we talk about our country in the context of the church and our faith, right, that Jesus, if anything, was never an American. We have no idea what such a thing was. Jesus lived in the empire of Rome, call him an Italian. Jesus lived in the province of Syria, call him a Syrian. Jesus lived in the sub-province of Palestine and then of Judea at various points in his life because borders move. Jesus was a member of the Jewish people. He was all of these things. And at the end of the day, Christian faith is not American faith. There's no such thing as American Christianity. Christianity transgresses boundaries. Christianity transgresses borders. Christianity is so much more than can be contained in any one national identity. So, that said, we turn to this idea of freedom. And I love this passage in John chapter 8. Jesus is talking to a group of Jewish folks, and right at the center of the Jewish story, both 2,000 years ago when Jesus was preaching and still today, is this event called the Exodus. You can read about it in the book of the Bible called, wait for it, Exodus. And in the story of the Exodus, we hear how God frees the Israelites from the bonds of slavery, giving them this gift of freedom in their identity as children of Abraham. It's sort of like having your identity as American rooted in this event that we call the Declaration of Independence, right? Where we talk about throwing off the bonds of tyranny as we pursue our own independence and freedom. And so Jesus is talking to this group of people who have this sense of freedom at the core of their identity, that we are free people. We are people of liberty because we are children of Abraham. And Jesus goes, what a bunch of hooey. You're not free. Jesus says, whatever your number one priority is, you are enslaved to it. Everyone who sins, he says, is a slave to sin. Another way of saying that is whatever your priority is, you are enslaved to that thing. If your priority is the house I live in and making sure that I have enough money in my 401k, guess what? That's your master. If your priority is your political ideology, guess what? You are a slave to that political ideology. If your priority is your own self-image, who you are and who you present to the world, you become enslaved to that. Whoever sins, says Jesus, is a slave to sin. And they say, but we're the children of Abraham. But I'm an American. Jesus says, pay attention. Pay attention. You who think you are so very, very free, pay attention. Every day, like Jacob Marley pulling along his chains, every day you pick up another thing that helps you make decisions based on it. And the only way to find freedom, the only way to let go of those things is to become a slave to Jesus Christ. The only way to let go of those other things and to find real freedom is to find our identity first and foremost in as being a child of God saved by Jesus Christ. That's it. That's the only thing. Jesus says to those who are gathered, look, if you were Abraham's children, you would do Abraham's work. In other words, Stop talking and show me. Paul says the same thing. It's for freedom that you have been set free. But don't let this freedom be an opportunity to indulge your selfish impulses, but serve one another through love. You see, too often when we talk about freedom, what we mean is I'm free to do whatever I want, and you can't tell me what to do. It's an impulse that begins when we learn how to talk, right? As soon as we are able to talk, we begin to respond to our parents with that wonderful world of, I don't want to. And no. Comes back around when they're teenagers. Just let you know. But it goes on then when we're adults as well. I want to make decisions based on what's best for David. I want to make decisions based on what helps my priorities, my family, which again, these are good things. But when we place them out of priority order, they become idols. Paul says your freedom is not a freedom to. It's not a freedom from. It's not a freedom from being told what to do. It's not a freedom from listening to others. It's a freedom to. It's a freedom to serve others. It's a freedom to love others. If our freedom is the freedom of Jesus Christ, it will always look like love. And if it doesn't look like love, it's not the freedom of Jesus Christ. I don't care what the Constitution says. If it doesn't look like love, it's not the freedom of Jesus Christ. I think that's a hard word to hear in our world today. I think that's a thing that we might not necessarily want to wrestle with today. Freedom. Freedom means becoming, every day, a servant of our neighbor. Freedom means every day putting the needs of our neighbors ahead of our own. Freedom. Freedom means thinking about others and the needs of others first. It is for freedom that you have been set free. Therefore, serve one another through love, for all the law is fulfilled in a single statement. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you were Abraham's children, says Jesus, you would do Abraham's works. We often want to, as a nation, in our public discourse, be a nation of people, a community of people who are defined by freedom, that we are the freest in the world. And I think that is a wonderful goal. I think the goals and aspirations that have been laid out for us in this country are wonderful things. Liberty and justice for all. Equality. A court system which treats all people equally. These are wonderful things. A world and a country in which people can be lifted up out of poverty and where nobody falls through the cracks. I think these are phenomenal ideas to celebrate this weekend. I think they're even better things to go out and do on Monday. That if we want to be people who are known as freedom-seeking people, that means that we go out and we live with these fruit of the Spirit in all that we do. We listen to the words of Jesus and we show the world what it means to be free. We show the world what it means to be free to love and serve our neighbors. We show the world what it means to find our identity, our meaning, our sense of self, first and foremost in the gospel of Jesus Christ. We love our neighbor as ourselves. That's a freedom. That's an independence that's worth celebrating. That's a freedom and that's an independence that looks like the gospel lived out in the world. If you were Abraham's children, if you are children of the gospel, then do the works of the gospel.